Hello, I'm Emily Rhodes, and today I'm going to be talking to you about The Greengage Summer by Rumer Godden. It's a really, really wonderful book, and I'm really excited to share it with you this month. I've loved rereading it. This is the July 2026 book for Emily's Walking Book Club. If you're not yet part of our 4,000 strong group, please do join us. We have a Substack that goes out every Monday, which has got loads more info about the books, links to read on, listen to interviews with the authors, that kind of thing. It's also the place to find all the booking links for our events and info about our next titles. Very excitingly, I'm about to launch the autumn programme, some good books on there. And yes, so we obviously walk and talk about books. We do that on Hampstead Heath or in Regent's Park. And if you can't join a walk, we also have a seated Zoom on Monday evenings. So it's really lovely to see you at any of those if you can come along. So the Greengage Summer, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the book now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it's about, read a bit out, and have a little chat about coming of age, because I feel this is a really good coming of age novel, and I have a real soft spot for coming of age novels. I don't know what that says about me, but there we are. So it's told from the perspective of Cecil, who must be about 13. About 13 when the action is happening, but she's actually telling it looking back in time. So she's an adult looking back at this time of her life. And there are these little moments where sort of time goes a bit funny, where someone jumps in and says, Joss always said this happened, or, we get reminded that the story is framed by the rest of life. And in that way, it reminds me a little bit of The Go-Between, another great coming of age novel, which was, interestingly, I just looked this up. The Go-Between was written or published in 1953 and this in 1958. So probably someone out there has written a great piece about why the 1950s are the golden age of coming of age novels. But anyway, here are two really good ones, both published in the 50s. Cecil is in quite a large, slightly alternative, eccentric, very English family. Her older sister is Joss, very kind of beautiful and a bit more sophisticated and grown up. And then she's got sort of three younger ones, including, I think it's three, including the wonderful Will Mouse, who's a little boy who's obsessed with kind of fashion design, which is quite an unusual thing, I think, to put in a 1950s novel. Anyway, their mum is fed up of them all behaving so badly, so decides to take them off to show them the battlefields of France, in the hope that, when they see the horror of how many people lost their lives for them, they will start behaving a bit better. I mean, brilliant parenting tip, I think. Note to self. Anyway, and this is all still the kind of setup of the book, so I don't think there are any spoilers here. They go off to France. On the way, the mother gets an infected horsefly bite, which makes her actually severely ill, which leads the children to kind of fend for themselves. And they arrive at this hotel that they've been recommended. By this stage, the mother, can barely speak. They're completely dishevelled. All they've eaten, I think, is a garlic sausage and possibly some oranges. And then, everyone at the hotel is quite snotty, and it looks like they're not going to be taken in, and it's the middle of the night and they don't know what to do. Cecil brilliantly speaks great French, which I think we learn is because she kept getting in trouble at school and their punishment was learning French poems. Anyway, it stood her in great stead. So I suppose that gives her a position of a bit more authority. So already the mum's been taken away, and very soon afterwards, Joss is actually also quite ill. So Cecil's kind of in charge. She speaks French. She's the oldest person in their party, the oldest functioning person in their family. Anyway, just when it looks like, they're going to go out into the night, no room at the inn, Elliot appears, and he is this mysterious Englishman who is staying at the hotel, and he ends up kind of taking responsibility for the children and helping them, being their guardian. So this sets everything up for the Greengage Summer, a summer in France where everything's a bit different, actually very different to how it is in sort of suburban England. Their mother's in hospital being cared for by nuns, which they find extraordinary. Joss sort of disappears really for the first half of the novel, then reappears to great effect later on. And Cecil is kind of coming into herself, I suppose. I think this book, for me, really transports me to a different place and time, not just in the world, but also kind of within myself. Maybe that sounds a bit weird. But I think the best books really do that. They maybe bring to the surface part of you that you haven't thought about for a while, or something that's kind of been gone. And no, I don't think I did have this extraordinary summer in France at a young age where various twists happen. But I think those summers of childhood, not childhoods of summer, those summers of childhood and those summers of adolescence are a really, I think they were a really important time for me, and I think they were probably for most people. And I love the way Rumer Godden captures this feeling of time being so expansive. She says somewhere, it was 23 days until the end of the holidays. And, here, those days, each day was like a year. So who can even think about what would happen in 23 years' time? And I so remember that feeling of time just stretching out, a day just feeling like you're in a completely different way of being. You can't possibly think beyond that back to real life. It's a bit like in Narnia, when they go into the wardrobe and they're in they're in this other world, and then they come back and only a second's passed, but while they've been in Narnia they've become like kings and queens, and everything's happened. And in a way that's what the coming of age summers are like. You absolutely become a queen, become a different person. So much happens in that time, and then you return to reality, and maybe a month's passed or a week, and it's so weird slotting back into that. So I suppose it'd be good to have a little think about what coming of age means. There's that loss of childhood, that loss of innocence, and that gain of understanding, a kind of foothold into the adult world. I think what makes it so electric to me is that neither one of these things is all good or all bad. There's this real beauty in the childhood innocence, and we see that here in the younger children, particularly the little one. He's always being fed delicious morsels by the French chef in the hotel, and there's a sort of longing for that innocence, that ignorance of that sort of early childhood, that very sort of sensual, just sitting around eating, being quite sort of spacey, the adult lives going on around you, and you're sort of protected from them by not knowing about them. But here we see Cecil and her older sister Joss step into this adult world and get these inklings that the adults aren't all good, that there are kind of complicated currents at play, that this is a world of deceit, of shifting allegiances, of kind of horror in a way, as well as something really intoxicating. Brilliantly, they keep getting drunk. There's all this like wine around and champagne, and there's this sort of wild night where Paul, the kitchen boy, gets them all really drunk, smashing the wine around, and then they're all hungover the next day. I mean, I did not get that drunk at that age. But I suppose, they're in France, and there's this real loosening of boundaries. Their mother's out of the picture. England's not there. It's a different language, different rules. And there's this kind of giddiness that you really feel when they're drinking their first champagne, that feels really wonderful and bubbly and exciting. And then you see it shift into the sort of sicky, head spinny side of things. I mean, that's sort of an experience of getting drunk, right? It begins, ooh, and then it goes a bit, ooh, and then the next morning you feel awful. In some ways, that's a bit like the process of coming of age. There's this thrilling moment, and then there's the slightly sickening moment, and then there's that hangover of knowledge learned that you can't unlearn, and how horrid that feels. The bit I was just going to read out briefly, it's quite near the beginning. It's when they're there, they've sort of recently arrived in the hotel, and so this is all in Cecil. Cecil is telling this story. A typewriter clacked in the office. I looked over the garden to the green dew of the wilderness and orchard, the sun haze beyond, and I could stay in no longer. Slowly I went down the steps, across the gravel, past the flower beds, and through a gap in the box hedge. Stepping in dew, my head in the sun, I walked into the orchard, and before I knew what I had done, reached up to touch a greengage. It came off, warm and smooth, into my hand. I looked quickly round, but no one came. No voice scolded, and after a moment I bit into the ripe golden flesh. Then I ate another and another, until replete with fruit and ecstasy, I went back to my post. There was no sign of Mademoiselle Zizi, but presently Elliot came out. He was aloof and unapproachable. How did I know then that he had these times? I do not know, but as if the first greengage had been an Eden apple, I was suddenly older and wiser, and did not try to speak to him. He passed me as if I did not exist, and went out into the sun. He was wearing linen trousers, a dark blue open-necked shirt. Morissette ran out with a deck chair for him, but he was curt with her. How wonderful to be as curt in French as in English. The ecstasy faded. I was suddenly depressed again. How inferior we were. Our family had never been anywhere at all, and did not know anything. It's a great moment, isn't it? I mean, maybe it's a little heavy-handed. We kind of get the fact that the greengage is the Eden apple without that having to be spelt out. But, it's so symbolic, isn't it? She's going out, into the garden, through the hedge, into what she's going to take that fruit. and suddenly, you know, there's this ecstasy, there's this knowledge, and then the ecstasy fades, and there's something a bit horrid about the knowledge. It's the knowledge maybe that you're not quite ready for it, that, you know, their family doesn't know anything, and here's this adult world, and she's just edging into it. Oh, it's so good. I love this book. I don't know why coming of age books mean so much to me. I think maybe I'm still coming of age in that, you know, the adult world gets more and more sort of sinister and complicated. I think there's also, though, this nostalgia for this kind of simpler time. You know, this is a world where you come of age in France eating greengages, and, you know, it's the 50s. In fact, I also just a few nights ago watched the film adaptation of The River by Rumer Godden, which takes place in India. Brilliant film, but a lot of similar themes of sort of falling in love for the first time, this kind of horrible loss of innocence. But again, it's a different world. It's a different world here. You know, everyone would be like on their phones in the garden. You know, they would. It would just be different, and I suppose it makes me think, how do we come of age now? You know, how are our children coming of age? Is probably not. Well, maybe it is. But part of me feels that there isn't the innocence that is lost here in today's world is maybe already a little bit polluted. I don't know. There's a lot to think about. I've sort of rambled on rather a lot, so I'm going to leave this with you. I'm really looking forward to sharing our thoughts on this book. There's so much in it. I've talked a bit about the coming of age. There's loads to say about France and that and the war, and yeah, there's a lot here. The way it's written is kind of extraordinary, I think. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Leave me a comment if you like. Let me know which other ones of her books or film adaptations you've enjoyed. Black Narcissus, very good one as well. I'd love to know more about her children's books too. So yeah, looking forward to getting stuck in, and thank you for listening.